A few seconds after the birth of these twins, a doctor discovers a one-in-a-million secret. In the midst of their joyous arrival, an extraordinary revelation threatens to change everything they thought they knew about family. How did this miraculous discovery come to light? And what will it mean for the lives of these newborns? Join us for an unforgettable story of love, mystery, and the incredible bonds that hold a family together. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Linda sat cross-legged on the plush beige carpet of their living room, surrounded by a fortress of baby books and colorful nursery catalogs. The warm afternoon light streamed through the windows, casting a gentle glow on the pink and blue paint swatches spread before her. Robert settled beside her, his shoulder brushing against hers as he picked up one of the books. "Two of everything," he said with a soft chuckle, holding up a catalog showing matching cribs. Who would have thought? Linda's hand instinctively moved to her slightly rounded belly. "It still feels surreal sometimes," she admitted, her voice tender. "Twins, Robert. We're having twins." The weight of their whirlwind romance and recent marriage hung in the air between them. It hadn't been an easy journey. Their passionate arguments about timing, responsibility, and commitment had tested them both. But here they were, surrounded by the promise of new life and shared dreams. "Remember our first big fight?" Robert asked, setting down the catalog. "When I said we were moving too fast?" Linda nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "You stormed out, then came back an hour later with a bouquet of daisies and that terrible attempt at an apology poem." "Hey now," Robert protested, but his eyes crinkled with amusement. "I poured my heart into those rhymes." Their laughter filled the room, easing the tension that sometimes still lingered from their rocky start. Linda leaned against Robert's shoulder, drawing comfort from his solid presence. Their relationship had been forged in the fire of unexpected circumstances, but their love had proven stronger than their fears. "I know we didn't plan this," Robert said softly, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "But every time I think about our babies, I just feel blessed." Linda turned to look at him, seeing the sincerity in his warm brown eyes. "Even after all our arguments? All the uncertainty?" "Especially after all that," he assured her, squeezing her gently. "Every challenge we've faced has just shown me how right this is, how right we are together." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, surrounded by the physical signs of their growing family. Linda's fingers traced the edge of a page showing a painted nursery mural, her mind full of possibilities and hopes for the future. "I love you," she whispered, meaning it more deeply than ever before. Robert's response was to press a tender kiss to her forehead, his hand joining hers as it rested protectively over their unborn children. In that quiet moment, their shared hopes for the future felt stronger than any past conflicts, any lingering doubts. They had chosen each other, chosen this family, and together they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. The evening had settled into a quiet calm when Linda felt the first sharp pain. She was sitting on the living room couch, flipping through a magazine, when the contraction gripped her suddenly. Her hand flew to her swollen belly and her eyes widened with recognition. "Robert!" she called out, her voice steady but tight with tension. "I think it's time." Robert appeared in the doorway, dish towel still in hand from cleaning up after dinner. One look at Linda's face told him everything he needed to know. "The babies? But it's early." 3 weeks early, Linda confirmed, gritting her teeth as another contraction rolled through her body. She tried to remember her breathing exercises, but the unexpected timing of it all made her heart race. Robert sprang into action, dropping the towel and heading straight for their bedroom where the packed hospital bags waited. "How far apart are the contractions?" he called out. Linda glanced at the clock, trying to focus through the discomfort. "About 7 minutes, I think. They're getting stronger." In the bedroom, Robert methodically went through their hospital checklist. "Clothes for you, clothes for the babies, toiletries," he muttered, double-checking each item. His hands moved with purpose, but Linda could see the slight tremor in them. "The camera," Linda reminded him, slowly making her way to the bedroom. And don't forget the birth plan. It's in the blue folder on the desk. Robert nodded, adding both items to the bags. He paused briefly to help Linda sit on the edge of the bed, his hand gentle on her lower back. "How are you holding up?" "I'm okay," she breathed, though her knuckles were white as she gripped the bedsheet. "Just nervous. It's really happening, isn't it?" "It really is," Robert agreed, his voice soft with wonder despite the urgency of the moment. He knelt in front of her, meeting her eyes. "We've got this, Linda. Together." Another contraction hit, stronger than the last. Linda closed her eyes, focusing on her breathing while Robert timed it on his phone. 6 minutes now, he announced. "We should get going." They moved with careful efficiency, Robert gathering the last few items while Linda changed into comfortable clothes. The hospital bags, packed weeks ago and regularly checked, were loaded into the car along with the 2 carefully installed car seats that would bring their babies home. As Robert helped Linda into the passenger seat, she grabbed his hand. "What if something's wrong? They're coming so early." "The doctor said twins often come early, remember?" Robert squeezed her hand reassuringly. "And we're going to one of the best hospitals in the state." Linda nodded, trying to take comfort in his words as she settled into the seat. Robert rushed around to the driver's side, starting the car with steady hands despite the nervous energy radiating from him. As they pulled out of the driveway, Linda reached for Robert's hand again, gripping it tightly as another contraction began. The interior of their family SUV felt smaller than usual, filled with the weight of anticipation and the rapid breathing of Linda's controlled pants. The automatic doors of the emergency room whooshed open as Robert guided Linda through them, her steps measured between contractions. A nurse immediately approached them with a wheelchair, her experienced eyes taking in Linda's condition. "How far apart are the contractions?" the nurse asked, helping Linda into the chair. "About 5 minutes now," Robert answered, still holding Linda's hand. "Twins 3 weeks early," Linda added through gritted teeth. The nurse nodded efficiently. "I'll take her up to maternity right away, sir. You'll need to check her in at the desk first." Robert hesitated, not wanting to leave Linda's side. Linda squeezed his hand once before letting go. "Go on, I'll be fine." He watched as the nurse whisked Linda away toward the elevators, leaving him standing alone in the emergency room. The registration desk seemed miles away as he walked toward it, his heart pounding with each step. In the waiting area, Robert paced back and forth, his hands clasped behind his back. The arguments they'd had just months ago seemed so distant now. Fights about trust, about their hasty marriage, about their readiness for parenthood. Yet here they were, stronger for having worked through it all. Meanwhile, up in the maternity ward, Linda was being settled into the delivery room. Dr. Ellis, a woman with kind eyes and steady hands, reviewed Linda's chart while nurses bustled around preparing equipment. "Everything looks good, Linda," Dr. Ellis said warmly. "Your twins are in a good position, and we're well equipped to handle an early delivery." Linda nodded, trying to focus on the doctor's reassuring words rather than her anxiety. "Is it normal, them coming this early?" "Quite common with twins," Dr. Ellis confirmed. "Your babies are at a good gestational age. Try not to worry." A nurse helped Linda change into a hospital gown while another set up monitoring equipment. The familiar beep of heart rate monitors filled the room, 3 distinct rhythms for mother and babies. When Robert was finally allowed in, he found Linda propped up in the delivery bed, looking both exhausted and determined. He rushed to her side, taking her hand in his. "I'm sorry about all the fighting before," Linda whispered between contractions. "About not being sure if we were ready." Robert shook his head, brushing her hair back from her forehead. "We both had doubts, but we worked through them together. That's what matters." Dr. Ellis approached the bed, snapping on fresh gloves. "All right, Linda, you're progressing nicely. Let's get ready to welcome these babies into the world." The delivery room hummed with purposeful activity as the medical team made their final preparations. Linda gripped Robert's hand tighter, drawing strength from his presence. Despite the fear and uncertainty of the past months, they had found their way here together, ready to face whatever came next as a family. The contractions grew stronger and more frequent, causing Linda to grip the bed rails with white knuckles. Dr. Ellis checked her progress regularly while nurses monitored the vital signs of both mother and babies on the surrounding screens. "You're doing great, Linda," Dr. Ellis encouraged. "You're fully dilated now. When you feel the next contraction, I want you to push." The minutes ticked by as Linda struggled through increasingly difficult contractions. Dr. Ellis tried various positions and techniques, working skillfully to assist the delivery while maintaining constant communication with her team. "Blood pressure's rising," a nurse called out. The delivery room hummed with anticipation as Linda gripped Robert's hand. Sweat beaded on her forehead while Dr. Ellis positioned herself at the foot of the bed. The steady beep of monitors filled the air, tracking both Linda's and the baby's vital signs. "All right, Linda, one more big push," Dr. Ellis encouraged, her voice calm and steady. "We can see the head." Linda drew in a deep breath, gathering her remaining strength. Robert squeezed her hand and whispered, "You're doing amazing, honey. Just a little more." With determination etched across her face, Linda bore down. Her effort was rewarded with a tiny cry that pierced the room's tension. Dr. Ellis skillfully guided the baby into the world, announcing with joy, "It's a boy!" The nurses quickly wrapped the crying infant in a warm blanket after cleaning him. Dr. Ellis performed quick checks of his vitals, smiling as she confirmed his health. "He's perfect," she declared, carefully placing him in Linda's waiting arms. Linda's eyes filled with tears as she gazed down at her son's tiny face. "Hello, Ethan," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. The baby's cries softened as he nestled against her chest. Robert leaned in close, gently touching Ethan's tiny hand with his finger. "He's beautiful," he said softly, his own eyes glistening. Ethan's fingers curled reflexively around his father's finger, causing Robert to catch his breath in wonder. The medical team worked efficiently around them, but Linda and Robert remained lost in their private bubble of joy. They marveled at Ethan's delicate features, his button nose, his rosebud mouth, and the slight dusting of fair hair on his head. 10 fingers, 10 toes, one of the nurses announced cheerfully as she completed her assessment. And a strong heartbeat. He's a healthy little guy. Linda cradled Ethan closer, breathing in his newborn scent. Robert wrapped an arm around her shoulders and they shared a look of pure happiness. The room filled with a peaceful quiet, broken only by Ethan's soft cooing sounds. "Congratulations," Dr. Ellis said warmly, watching the new family bond. "He's absolutely perfect." The nurses moved around them with practiced ease, recording measurements and ensuring both mother and baby were comfortable. But for Linda and Robert, the world had narrowed to just the three of them, sharing their first precious moments together as they welcomed Ethan into their family. The delivery room's atmosphere shifted dramatically as Linda's face contorted with renewed pain. Dr. Ellis's expression grew serious as she monitored the second twin's progress. The steady beeping of the heart monitor quickened, matching the rising tension in the room. "Something's not quite right," Dr. Ellis announced, her voice calm but firm. "The baby's position is making this more challenging." Linda gripped Robert's hand tighter, fear flashing across her exhausted features. "Is our baby okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We're monitoring everything closely," Dr. Ellis assured her, "but we need to try some different approaches to help this little one along." The medical team moved with practiced efficiency, bringing in additional equipment. A nurse adjusted Linda's position, while another prepared instruments that might be needed. Robert watched them work, his face pale with concern. "Breathe with me, honey," he whispered to Linda, trying to keep his own voice steady. "Just like we practiced." Hours crept by as Linda struggled through increasingly difficult contractions. Sweat dampened her hospital gown, and tears streaked her cheeks. Robert dabbed her forehead with a cool cloth, feeling helpless as she fought through the pain. "We may need to consider using forceps," Dr. Ellis explained, studying the monitors carefully. "The baby's heart rate is stable, but we need to move things along." Considering the complications involved, Dr. Ellis asked Robert to wait outside in the waiting area till they were able to safely deliver the baby. Linda nodded weakly, too exhausted to speak. Robert squeezed her hand. "You're the strongest person I know," he told her. "You can do this." The nurses worked in synchronized motion, responding to Dr. Ellis's quiet commands. One adjusted the IV drip while another prepared the necessary instruments. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, marking each moment of the prolonged labor. "Linda, I need you to give me everything you've got now," Dr. Ellis called out. "The baby's finally in position." Linda gathered her remaining strength, her face set with determination. "That's it," Dr. Ellis encouraged. "I can see the head. One more big push." With a final tremendous effort, Linda bore down, the room filled with the sound of her struggle, and then suddenly, a new cry pierced the air. Dr. Ellis moved quickly, guiding the baby into the world with skilled hands. "It's a girl," she announced, holding up the tiny infant. The room fell silent for a moment as everyone took in the sight of the beautiful black baby girl, her cries strong and healthy. Linda stared in astonishment as the nurses quickly wrapped her in a blanket and began their initial assessments. The quiet of the hospital at night wrapped around Linda like a heavy blanket. The soft beeping of monitors and distant footsteps of nurses only amplified her sense of isolation. After several minutes of internal struggle, Linda called for Dr. Ellis before Robert was allowed in to see the newly delivered girl baby. Dr. Ellis came by Linda, dark circles visible under his kind eyes. "Mrs. Thompson, is everything all right?" "Could we talk privately?" Linda asked, her voice trembling. Her heart pounded so hard she was sure he could hear it. Dr. Ellis pulled up a chair beside her bed, maintaining a professional yet compassionate demeanor. The plastic wheels squeaked against the floor as he settled in. "Of course." Linda took a deep breath, her hands fidgeting with the hospital blanket, twisting the thin fabric between her fingers. "A few months before I got pregnant, Robert and I were having problems. We separated for a while." She paused, gathering her courage, feeling the words stick in her throat. "During that time, I had a friend, Marcus. He was there for me when I was at my lowest." Dr. Ellis listened attentively as Linda continued, her voice barely above a whisper, tears threatening to spill from her eyes. "One night I was particularly upset. Marcus came over to comfort me and she wiped away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. I made a terrible mistake. We spent the night together." "I see," Dr. Ellis said gently, allowing her to continue at her own pace. His hands were folded calmly in his lap, his posture open and non-judgmental. "The very next day I knew it was wrong. I went to Robert, apologized for everything. We reconciled that night." Linda's eyes drifted to her sleeping twins, their tiny chests rising and falling in perfect synchronization. "I never told him about Marcus. I convinced myself it didn't matter, that everything would be fine." Dr. Ellis nodded, understanding. "And now you're concerned about the paternity of the twins." "Yes," Linda admitted, her voice breaking like thin ice. "I don't know what to do. I love Robert so much, and we've worked so hard to rebuild our relationship. But now—" She gestured helplessly toward the babies, their peaceful faces unaware of the turmoil surrounding them. "Dr. Ellis, I need your help," she pleaded, gripping the blanket tighter. "I don't know how to handle this without destroying everything we've built. How do I tell Robert? What if Marcus needs to know? I'm so confused and scared." The doctor leaned forward slightly, his expression understanding but professional, the overhead light catching the silver in his hair. "These situations are never easy, Mrs. Thompson. The genetic testing will provide clarity, but you're right to be thinking about how to approach this sensitively." Linda wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, feeling the dampness of tears she hadn't even realized she'd been crying. "I just want to protect my family, but I know I can't hide from the truth forever." The weight of her words hung heavy in the quiet room, punctuated only by the steady rhythm of the monitors and the soft breathing of her newborn twins. Robert sat in the waiting area, his leg bouncing nervously as he listened to the muffled sounds from the delivery room. The sterile hospital walls seemed to close in around him as minutes stretched into hours. His hands clutched the armrests of the uncomfortable plastic chair, knuckles white with tension. After some time, Robert was called in to see Linda and the twins. He first went to check on Linda and held her hand tightly. Linda's grip on his hand loosened, and he looked down to see tears streaming down her face. "Robert?" she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "There's something I need to tell you." The room seemed to grow impossibly quiet as Linda spoke, her words coming in broken sentences. "During our separation, Marcus was there for me. One night, I was so lost, so hurt." She paused, drawing a shaky breath. "We were together just once. The very next day, I came back to you." Robert's hand slipped from hers as the weight of her confession hit him. He stared at Aisha, then at Ethan, his world tilting on its axis. The betrayal cut deep, leaving him speechless. His chest felt tight, making it hard to breathe. They sat in heavy silence, the only sounds being the soft coos of their newborns and the steady beep of medical equipment. Robert's thoughts raced, memories of their reconciliation now tainted with this new knowledge. Linda reached for his hand again, but he pulled away, needing space to process this life-changing revelation. Without a word, Robert stood and walked toward the door. His steps were unsteady as he left the delivery room, leaving Linda alone with their twins, the gulf between them growing with each step he took. The next morning, Dr. Ellis approached Linda and Robert's bedside, his clipboard held close to his chest. The joy of the successful delivery still lingered in the air, but something in his demeanor suggested there was more to discuss. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson," he began carefully, "I need to talk to you about something rather unusual regarding your twins." Linda cradled Aisha in her arms while Robert sat beside her, still holding Ethan. The contrast between the siblings was striking under the bright hospital lights. "As you can see," Dr. Ellis continued, gesturing toward the babies, "there are some significant physical differences between your children. Considering Linda's close encounters with two separate partners, it's difficult to say anything about who the father could be." Robert's brow furrowed. "What exactly are you saying, doctor?" "I would strongly recommend genetic testing to confirm the father of the children," Dr. Ellis continued. "It's a simple procedure, just a cheek swab from each of you and both babies. The results would give us a clear picture of the genetic situation." Linda's eyes welled with tears as she looked down at Aisha, then at Ethan in Robert's arms. "The testing process is straightforward," Dr. Ellis assured them, sensing their distress. "We can arrange it as soon as tomorrow if you'd like. The results usually take about a week to process." The silence in the room grew thick as Linda and Robert absorbed this information. Their eyes met briefly before darting away, each lost in their own thoughts about what this might mean for their family. "I'll give you some time to process this," Dr. Ellis said softly, moving toward the door. "When you're ready, the nurse can provide you with more information about the testing procedure." Linda sat in the dimly lit nursery, cradling Aisha against her chest. The baby's warmth provided little comfort as she watched Ethan sleeping soundly in his hospital bassinet. The quiet beeping of monitors and distant hospital sounds only heightened her sense of isolation. Through the window, she could see Robert pacing in the hallway, his shoulders tense and head bowed. Taking a deep breath, Linda gently placed Aisha beside her sleeping brother. She knew it was time to face the situation head-on. Linda stepped into the hallway, her heart pounding. "Robert," she called softly. He turned, his face a mask of confusion and hurt. She reached for his hand, relieved when he didn't pull away. "Please, can we talk?" Her voice trembled. Leading him back into the nursery, she guided him to sit beside her in the comfortable chairs provided for new parents. "I know I've hurt you deeply," Linda began, her eyes filling with tears. "What I did during our separation, it's my biggest regret. But our love, everything we've built together, it's real, Robert. It's always been real." She squeezed his hand gently, encouraged when he didn't resist. "Remember when we first met? How you made me laugh even on my worst days? Remember our first apartment and how we stayed up all night painting the walls that awful yellow color?" A ghost of a smile flickered across Robert's face at the memory. "We chose each other, Robert. Through all our fights and makeups, we chose to build a life together. These babies, both of them, they're a part of that life now." Linda's voice grew stronger, more determined. "I know I'm asking so much of you, but please, help me find a way through this. Help me show our children what real love and forgiveness look like." Robert remained silent, his gaze fixed on the sleeping twins. Linda could see the internal struggle playing across his features. "I'll spend the rest of my life making this right," she promised, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't do it without you. We need you, all of us." Robert closed his eyes, taking several deep breaths. When he opened them again, he looked at Linda, then at their children. After what felt like an eternity, he gave a slow, slight nod. Linda felt tears of relief spring to her eyes as they sat together in the quiet nursery, watching their newborn twins sleep peacefully. Though uncertainty still hung in the air, that small gesture of acknowledgement gave her hope that perhaps their family could heal. The morning sun filtered through Dr. Ellis's office windows as Linda and Robert sat side by side, their newborn twins sleeping peacefully in their carriers. The doctor's gentle demeanor did little to ease the palpable tension in the room. Linda nodded, her hand instinctively reaching for Robert's. To her relief, he didn't pull away. "The process is quite straightforward," Dr. Ellis continued. "The results typically take about a week to process." Robert cleared his throat. "And the accuracy? How certain can we be?" "The tests are highly accurate, over 99%, Dr. Ellis assured them. "We work with one of the best genetic laboratories in the country." A nurse entered with testing kits, her movements efficient but gentle as she approached the babies. Linda watched anxiously as the nurse carefully swabbed first Ethan's cheek, then Aisha's. Both babies stirred but remained asleep. Robert's turn came next. He sat stiffly as the nurse collected his sample, his jaw tense but determined. "What happens now?" Linda asked softly as the nurse labeled the samples. "You'll be discharged today," Dr. Ellis explained. "We'll call you as soon as the results are available. Remember, whatever the outcome, our team is here to support you both." Later, as they stood at the hospital entrance, Linda paused. The automatic doors whooshed open and closed, but she couldn't seem to take that final step. Robert stood beside her, both carriers in his hands, waiting patiently. "Ready?" he asked quietly. Linda took a deep breath, looking at her sleeping babies. Ethan's fair skin and Aisha's darker complexion seemed even more striking in the bright morning light. She nodded slowly, and together they walked through the doors toward their car, the weight of uncertainty hanging heavy between them. The morning sun cast long shadows across the living room as Linda paced, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. Robert sat on the couch watching the twins sleep peacefully in their bassinets, unaware of the tension surrounding them. When the phone finally rang, Linda's heart skipped a beat. "Hello?" she answered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mrs. Thompson, this is Dr. Ellis's office. The doctor would like you and your husband to come in to discuss the test results." Linda's eyes met Robert's. "We'll be there right away." The drive to the hospital was silent, each lost in their own thoughts. The twins remained contentedly asleep in their car seats, Ethan occasionally making soft cooing sounds. In Dr. Ellis's office, the afternoon light filtered through Venetian blinds, creating striped patterns on his desk. He greeted them with a somber expression, gesturing for them to take seats. "I have the DNA test results," Dr. Ellis began, opening a folder. "The findings show that Ethan is indeed Robert's biological child. However," he paused, glancing between them, "Aisha's DNA does not match Robert's profile." Linda's hand flew to her mouth, even though she had suspected this outcome. Robert sat perfectly still, his face unreadable. "This is what we call heteropaternal superfecundation," Dr. Ellis explained, his tone gentle but clinical. "It's an extremely rare occurrence where twins have different biological fathers. In fact, there are only a handful of documented cases worldwide." "How?" Robert started, then cleared his throat. "How exactly does this happen?" Dr. Ellis leaned forward slightly. "It occurs when two eggs are fertilized by sperm from different men during the same ovulation period. The timing has to be precisely right, which is why it's so uncommon." Linda twisted her wedding ring, tears welling in her eyes. "So Marcus is definitely—" "Based on what you've shared about the timing, yes, Marcus would be Aisha's biological father," Dr. Ellis confirmed. The silence that followed felt heavy. broken only by the soft hum of the office air conditioning. Robert stared at his hands, while Linda wiped away tears that had begun to fall. "I know this is overwhelming news," Dr. Ellis said softly. "Would you like me to explain more about the genetic markers we found?" Linda and Robert exchanged glances, both looking lost and uncertain. Finally, Robert spoke, his voice rough with emotion. "What do we do now?" "That's a personal decision," Dr. Ellis replied carefully. "But given the circumstances, you might want to consider informing Marcus about these results." They left the office in a daze, the weight of the revelation pressing down on them. In the parking lot, they paused beside their car, the sleeping twins oblivious to the life-changing moment their parents were experiencing. The soft glow of the lamp cast long shadows across the living room, as Linda and Robert sat in heavy silence. The gentle breathing of their sleeping twins, Ethan and Aisha, provided a peaceful counterpoint to the tension between them. Outside, a light drizzle tapped against the windows, matching the somber mood within. "I still can't believe it," Robert whispered, staring at the DNA results spread across their coffee table. "The odds of this happening?" His hands shook slightly as he lifted one of the papers closer to the light, as if examining it again might somehow change the results. Linda traced her finger over the medical terminology on the papers, her wedding ring catching the lamplight. Dr. Ellis said it's incredibly rare, a 1 in a million chance. She swallowed hard, fighting back tears that threatened to fall. Robert leaned back, rubbing his temples. The familiar leather couch creaked beneath him. How do we even begin to handle this? Our twins having different fathers. It doesn't seem real. They had visited Dr. Ellis earlier that day for a more detailed explanation. His words still echoed in their minds. Heteropaternal superfecundation occurs when 2 eggs are fertilized by different men during the same ovulation period. The timing has to be absolutely perfect for this to happen. The doctor's clinical tone had made the revelation even more surreal. "I feel so lost," Linda admitted, her voice cracking. She pulled her cardigan tighter around herself. "Every time I look at them, I wonder how this will affect their future, our future." Robert's hands trembled slightly as he gathered the papers. A few slipped from his grasp, floating to the carpet. "I love them both, but this changes everything we thought we knew about our family." "Does it have to?" Linda asked softly, reaching down to retrieve the fallen papers. "They're still our children, Robert. Nothing can change that." Her eyes drifted to the twins' room, where a nightlight cast star-shaped patterns on the ceiling. The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken fears and doubts. Linda reached for Robert's hand, and after a moment's hesitation, he took it. His palm felt clammy against hers, but the connection was reassuring. "Maybe we should talk to someone," Linda suggested, her thumb gently stroking his hand. "A professional who can help us work through this." Robert nodded slowly, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "Marriage counseling? I think we need it. There's so much I don't know how to process." He glanced at the family photos on the wall, memories of happier, simpler times. "Me too," Linda agreed, wiping away a stray tear. "I want us to be strong for them, for our family." They moved closer together on the couch, drawing comfort from each other's presence. The twins stirred briefly in their cribs, their soft murmurs carrying through the baby monitor. It was a reminder of the precious lives that depended on them regardless of genetics. "I still love you," Robert whispered, his voice thick with emotion. His arm wrapped around Linda's shoulders, protective and uncertain all at once. "But I'm scared." Linda squeezed his hand tighter, resting her head against his chest. "I love you too. We'll figure this out together." They held each other in the dim light, their embrace saying more than words could express. The steady rhythm of the rain outside seemed to wash away some of their immediate anxiety. The decision to seek help felt like the first step on a long, uncertain path, but at least they would walk it together. In the nursery, Ethan and Aisha slept peacefully, blissfully unaware of the emotional storm their parents were weathering for their sake. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen windows as Linda sat alone at the breakfast table. Her coffee had grown cold, forgotten, as she watched Ethan and Aisha sleeping peacefully in their portable cribs. Her fingers drummed nervously against the ceramic mug while her mind wrestled with the weight of what lay ahead. Robert entered the kitchen, his footsteps heavy with purpose. "We need to tell him," he said quietly, placing a gentle hand on Linda's shoulder. "Marcus deserves to know the truth." Linda nodded slowly. "You're right. We can't keep this from him. It wouldn't be fair to anyone, especially Aisha." They spent the morning discussing how best to approach the situation. Robert paced the kitchen floor while Linda made notes on a yellow legal pad, trying to find the right words to explain something so unprecedented. "Maybe we should meet at that quiet cafe on Oak Street," Linda suggested. "It's private enough, but still neutral ground." Robert agreed, and Linda picked up her phone with trembling hands. She scrolled to Marcus's number, hesitating for a moment before pressing dial. Her heart pounded as she waited through 3 rings before hearing his familiar voice. "Marcus? Hi. Yes, everything's okay. But Robert and I need to talk to you about something important. Could you meet us tomorrow?" After arranging the meeting, Linda and Robert spent the rest of the day preparing themselves emotionally. They rehearsed their explanation, trying to anticipate Marcus's questions and concerns. The next morning, they drove to the cafe in tense silence. Robert's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, while Linda clutched her purse tightly in her lap. The short drive felt like hours. They spotted Marcus through the cafe window, already seated at a corner table with 3 cups of coffee waiting. His familiar smile greeted them as they entered, though it faded slightly when he noticed their serious expressions. "Thank you for meeting us," Linda began, her voice barely above a whisper. Robert reached for her hand under the table as she started to explain. They walked Marcus through the extraordinary circumstances of the twins' birth, the DNA results, and the rare genetic phenomenon that had led to this moment. Marcus sat perfectly still, his coffee untouched as he absorbed each word. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, then to a complex mix of emotions that was hard to read. When Linda finished speaking, Marcus took a deep breath, his hands clasped tightly on the table before him, and left to get back to his home. He mentioned that he needed some time to process this. A couple of days later, the living room was quiet, except for the soft sounds of the twins' breathing coming through the baby monitor. Linda sat on the couch, absently folding and refolding a baby blanket while Robert stood by the window, his shoulders tense with thought. "It's strange," Linda said softly, "how quickly everything has changed." Robert nodded, turning to face her. "I never imagined we'd be in this situation." Their contemplation was interrupted by a gentle knock at the door. Marcus stood there, looking nervous but determined. He had called earlier, asking if they could talk. "Thank you for seeing me," Marcus said as he settled into an armchair across from them. He cleared his throat, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "I've been thinking a lot about Aisha and our situation." Linda and Robert exchanged glances as Marcus continued, his voice steady despite his obvious nervousness. "I want to be part of Aisha's life," he said. "Not to disrupt what you have, but to support her, and both of you, in whatever way I can." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. "I'd like to contribute financially to her care. Having twins must be expensive, and I want to do my part." Robert's posture stiffened slightly, but he remained silent, listening. "I know this isn't easy for anyone," Marcus added quickly. "I'm so grateful for how understanding you've both been. I promise to respect your boundaries and follow your lead on what's best for Aisha." Linda sat forward, her voice gentle but firm. "We need to establish clear guidelines about visits and involvement. The twins are still so young and stability is important." "Of course," Marcus agreed eagerly. "Whatever you think is best. Maybe we could start with scheduled visits. I could come by once or twice a week whenever it works for your routine." They spent the next hour discussing specifics, visiting hours, financial arrangements, and boundaries. Marcus listened attentively, noting down their concerns and suggestions. "I want you both to know," Marcus said earnestly, "that I understand my role here. I'm not trying to replace anyone or disturb your family dynamic. I just want to contribute positively to Aisha's life." Robert finally spoke, his voice measured. "We appreciate your approach to this, Marcus. It shows real consideration for our situation." After careful discussion, they agreed on a schedule. Marcus would visit twice a week, always at prearranged times. The financial support would be handled through a formal arrangement, maintaining clear boundaries and expectations. As their discussion concluded, all three stood up. Marcus extended his hand first to Robert, then to Linda, the gesture carrying the weight of their agreement. Linda and Robert stepped into their quiet home, the weight of their meeting with Marcus still heavy in their minds. They settled onto their living room couch, where just hours before they had made life-changing decisions about their family's future. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the windows, highlighting the worry lines on their faces. "We should write down everything we agreed to," Linda said, reaching for a notebook on the coffee table. "I want to make sure we're clear on all the details." Her fingers brushed against a family photo as she grabbed the pen, reminding her of everything at stake. Robert nodded, his expression thoughtful as he loosened his tie. "Twice weekly visits, always scheduled in advance," he began, as Linda jotted down notes. "And the financial arrangements through the lawyer." He rubbed his temples, trying to process the complexity of their situation. As they reviewed their agreement with Marcus, Linda's hands trembled slightly. "I keep thinking about how this will affect the twins as they grow up," she admitted. "Will Aisha feel different? Will Ethan?" Her voice cracked slightly with emotion. Robert placed his hand over hers, steadying her writing. The simple gesture spoke volumes about their partnership. "That's why we need to be careful about how we handle this. Maybe we should look into family counseling, someone who can guide us through these challenges." "I've been thinking about that too," Linda said, leaning into his shoulder for support. "We need professional help to navigate this situation. And maybe we should talk to Sarah and Tom." She referred to their closest friends who had always been supportive during difficult times. The thought of their friends' understanding brought a small measure of comfort. They spent the next hour mapping out a detailed schedule for Marcus's visits, considering the twins' feeding times and nap schedules. Robert insisted on maintaining their regular family routines, ensuring that Marcus's presence wouldn't disrupt their established patterns. They carefully marked important dates on their calendar, creating a framework that would give structure to their unconventional arrangement. "I want to make sure our marriage stays strong through all of this," Robert said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "We need to keep communicating, keep being honest with each other." He squeezed Linda's shoulder gently. Linda looked up from her notes, her eyes meeting his. Tears glistened but didn't fall. "I know this isn't easy for you. Your willingness to accept this situation, to include Marcus in our lives, it means everything to me." She reached up to touch his face, her wedding ring catching the fading sunlight. They continued discussing practical arrangements from how to handle holidays to setting boundaries for photographs and social media. Each decision was carefully considered, always putting their family's stability first. They created lists and backup plans, trying to anticipate every possible challenge. "Should we schedule regular check-ins?" Linda suggested, circling a date on their calendar. "Just you and me, to make sure we're both comfortable with how things are going?" Robert agreed, recognizing the importance of maintaining their connection through this transition. They decided on weekly conversations to address any concerns or feelings that might arise, choosing Sunday evenings after the twins were asleep. As they finished their planning session, Linda and Robert held each other close on the couch, their commitment to each other and their family stronger than ever. The setting sun painted the room in warm golden hues, offering a glimmer of hope for their future together. Linda pulled into her driveway, immediately noticing the crowd of reporters and camera crews surrounding her home. Her heart sank as microphones thrust toward her car window, and camera flashes illuminated the interior. The peaceful morning she had anticipated shattered into chaos as questions bombarded her from all directions. "Is it true about the twins?" one reporter shouted. "Can you explain how this medical miracle happened?" Robert emerged from the house, his face tense as he made his way through the crowd to reach Linda's car. He opened her door, creating a protective barrier with his body as she stepped out. "Please give us some space," Robert said firmly, guiding Linda toward their front door. The reporters pressed closer, their cameras clicking rapidly. Headlines already blazed across local news channels. Miracle twins, different fathers, one pregnancy, and medical marvel, the twin story that defies science. Linda paused at her doorstep, turning to face the lead reporter from the local newspaper. "I understand your interest in our story," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "But I'm requesting that you omit our names and personal details from your coverage. This is about protecting our children." Robert stood beside her, fielding basic questions while redirecting more invasive ones. "We appreciate the scientific interest," he explained, "but our primary concern is our family's privacy." Their neighbors gathered on nearby lawns, some shooting disapproving looks at the media circus while others whispered among themselves. Mrs. Johnson from next door approached a reporter saying, "These are good people who deserve their privacy," while others lingered, clearly hoping to catch more details about the situation. The couple retreated inside their home, immediately drawing the curtains. Linda contacted a security company to discuss installing additional protection, while Robert researched local attorneys specializing in media law. As the day progressed, the media presence remained steady. Reporters took turns camping outside their house, hoping to catch additional comments or photographs. The constant attention wore on Linda and Robert, their stress visible in their tired eyes and tense shoulders. Finally, as evening approached, the crowd began to disperse. Linda and Robert sat together on their living room couch, exhausted but relieved by the temporary quiet. The twins slept peacefully in their nursery, unaware of the commotion their unique situation had caused. Linda sat at her desk, trying to concentrate on her work documents while keeping an eye on Ethan and Aisha playing with their blocks on the floor nearby. The gentle sounds of their giggles provided a stark contrast to the growing stack of letters and emails from research institutions piling up on her desk. Another email notification pinged on her computer screen. This time, it was from a prestigious medical university offering to study the twins' unique genetic makeup. The message emphasized the groundbreaking nature of their case and the potential for significant medical advancements. "Mrs. Henderson," the email began, "we would be honored to include your children in our genetic research program. Our institution is prepared to offer substantial compensation for your family's participation." Linda rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of these decisions. The financial offers were becoming increasingly generous, enough to secure the twins' college funds and ease their current expenses. One researcher had even mentioned a six-figure sum during their meeting last Tuesday. Dr. Patterson, a leading geneticist from Boston, had been particularly persuasive during their coffee meeting. "Think of the possibilities," she had said, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "Your twins represent a unique opportunity to understand multiple paternity in humans. This could revolutionize our understanding of human reproduction." Robert entered the home office carrying 2 cups of tea. He placed one beside Linda and leaned against her desk. "Another offer?" he asked, noticing her furrowed brow. "3 more today," Linda replied, showing him the latest email. "They're offering twice what the last group did." They had discussed these proposals with their closest friends during Sunday dinner. Linda's best friend Sarah had pointed out the practical benefits of accepting. Think about their future, the opportunities this money could provide. Meanwhile, Robert's brother had cautioned against it. "Once you open that door, there's no closing it." Linda clicked through the various proposals on her screen, each one promising to handle the research with utmost discretion and respect. The scientific language couldn't mask their underlying eagerness to study Ethan and Aisha like laboratory specimens. Linda sat in the dimly lit nursery, watching Ethan stack colorful blocks while Aisha crawled after them. The setting sun cast long shadows across the room as she pulled out a notebook, drawing a line down the middle to create 2 columns, pros and cons. Under pros, she listed the obvious benefits: financial security, college funds, potential medical breakthroughs. The cons column filled up quickly with her deeper concerns: privacy invasion, media attention, psychological impact on the twins. Robert found her there an hour later, still adding items to her list. He pulled up a chair beside her, reading over her shoulder. "I spoke with David today," he said, referring to their family lawyer. "He mentioned some concerning legal implications about privacy rights and future consent issues." Linda nodded, adding another point to the cons column. "Dr. Martinez called back too," she said, thinking of their consultation with the child psychologist. She warned about the potential stress of repeated medical examinations on children this young. Even if we waited until they were older, there could be lasting effects on their sense of identity. They held a quiet family meeting after putting the twins to bed. Linda spread her notes across the kitchen table, including pamphlets about local community support programs and part-time job listings she'd collected. "We could make it work without the research money," she said, pointing to a highlighted section about financial planning. "It might be tight for a while, but we'd manage." Robert reached across the table, taking her hand. "We don't need their money to give our children a good life," he assured her. "What they need most is protection and love, not a bigger college fund." They spread out all the proposals, creating neat piles on the wooden table. The numbers were staggering, enough to secure their children's future education and then some. Robert picked up the latest offer, scanning the detailed terms. "The financial support would help," he admitted, his voice careful. "Especially with the twins starting school soon." Linda's fingers traced the edge of another letter. "But at what cost?" Her voice trembled slightly. "They want monthly examinations, blood work, genetic sampling. They'd be treating our babies like lab specimens." Robert reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "Tell me what you're thinking. I keep imagining them older, asking why we let strangers study them like they were some kind of scientific curiosity." Linda's eyes welled with tears. How would we explain that we traded their privacy for money? They sat in thoughtful silence, the weight of the decision hanging between them. Robert squeezed her hand gently. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." Linda pulled a fresh sheet of paper from her notebook. With careful consideration, she began drafting response letters to each research institution. Her words were polite but firm, expressing gratitude for their interest while declining their offers. "Our children's well-being comes first," she said, signing the last letter. "We'll find other ways to manage." Robert nodded in agreement. Together, they drafted a final email to the remaining research institutions, firmly declining any future proposals. The decision felt right. A choice to protect their family's integrity over financial gain. Robert gathered the declined offers into a folder, marking it "Research Proposals, Declined," before placing it in their filing cabinet. He returned to find Linda still at the table, a peaceful resolve having settled over her features. They embraced, drawing strength from their shared commitment to protecting their family's integrity. Through the dining room window, the setting sun painted the sky in gentle hues of pink and gold, matching the warmth of certainty in their hearts. The backyard echoed with laughter as Ethan and Aisha chased each other around the swing set. At 5 years old, their differences were visible only in appearance. Their bond as siblings transcended their unique genetic makeup. Linda watched from the kitchen window as Ethan helped Aisha climb the ladder to the slide, his protective nature showing in every careful movement. "They're inseparable," Robert said, joining Linda at the window. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pride evident in his smile. Their daily routine had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Mornings bustled with breakfast preparations and getting ready for preschool. Linda packed matching lunchboxes while Robert helped with shoelaces and backpacks. The twins' excited chatter filled the car during drop-offs, their stories and jokes mixing together in happy chaos. At preschool, their teacher, Mrs. Thompson, often commented on their remarkable relationship. "Ethan always makes sure Aisha is included in games," she told Linda during a parent-teacher conference. "And Aisha helps Ethan stay focused during story time." Weekend activities became treasured family traditions. Saturday mornings meant pancake breakfasts, where each twin got to choose their toppings. Sunday afternoons were reserved for park visits or library story time. During these outings, Marcus would occasionally join them, his presence warm but respectful of the family's boundaries. "Look at my drawing, Daddy," Aisha called out, holding up a colorful family portrait that included everyone: Linda, Robert, Marcus, and Ethan. Robert knelt beside her, admiring the artwork with genuine interest. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," he said, helping her pin it to the refrigerator alongside Ethan's latest masterpiece. Their pediatrician, Dr. Chen, monitored both children's development with careful attention. "They're both thriving," she assured Linda and Robert during their annual checkup. "Their growth charts are right on track." In the living room, a wall of photos captured their journey: first steps, first words, preschool graduation. Each image told the story of a family bound by love rather than genetics. Game nights filled the house with squeals of delight as the twins worked together to build block towers or complete simple puzzles. As the afternoon sun began to set, Linda and Robert stood in their backyard, watching Ethan and Aisha collaborate on a sandcastle. Their laughter carried across the yard, a testament to the joy they found in each other's company. Robert squeezed Linda's hand and she returned the gesture, both of them grateful for the strong family bonds they had nurtured. The twins ran toward their parents, sandy hands outstretched for a group hug. Linda and Robert enveloped their children in their arms, forming a tight circle of warmth and love. Aisha sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, her favorite coloring book spread before her. Her dark curls fell forward as she concentrated on staying within the lines. Looking up, she watched Ethan reading his storybook, his fair hair catching the afternoon sunlight streaming through the window. "Ethan," she said, her small voice filled with curiosity. "Why am I different from you?" She pointed to her arm, then gestured toward her brother's lighter skin. Linda, who had been passing by the doorway, paused mid-step. Her heart tightened at the innocent question. Robert appeared beside her, having heard Aisha's words from the hallway. They exchanged worried glances before entering the room together. "What makes you ask that, sweetheart?" Linda kept her voice gentle as she sat down beside Aisha. "Well," Aisha continued, setting down her crayon, "at preschool, Tommy said families look the same, but I don't look like Ethan. Or you and Daddy." Robert knelt beside them, placing a reassuring hand on Aisha's shoulder. "Every family is special in its own way," he said, though his voice carried a slight tremor. Linda and Robert had discussed this moment extensively, yet now that it had arrived, the carefully prepared words felt inadequate. Linda watched as Aisha's dark eyes studied their faces, searching for answers. "You see, Aisha," Linda began carefully, "our family has a very special history. One of our ancestors—" She paused, meeting Robert's supportive gaze. "Your great-great-grandmother," Robert added, helping Linda construct their simplified explanation. "Yes," Linda continued, "she had beautiful dark skin just like yours. Sometimes these special traits skip a few generations before appearing again." Aisha tilted her head, processing this information. "Like when we planted those purple flowers, and some came up white instead?" Linda felt tears prick at her eyes, touched by her daughter's innocent comparison. "Something like that? Yes." The parents had consulted Dr. Matthews, their family psychologist, about this very situation. She had advised them to keep explanations simple and age-appropriate, emphasizing love and family bonds over physical differences. "But why didn't Ethan get the same color?" Aisha persisted, looking at her brother who had set aside his book to listen. Robert shifted uncomfortably, aware of the delicate balance between truth and protection. "Sometimes nature decides these things in mysterious ways," he explained, using one of the phrases Dr. Matthews had suggested. Linda watched as Aisha considered this, her young mind working to make sense of the explanation. She and Robert maintained their composed expressions, though underneath, both felt the weight of their partial truth. The following afternoon, sunlight streamed through the living room windows as Aisha sat cross-legged on the carpet, surrounded by her colored pencils and drawing paper. Linda and Robert settled onto the couch nearby, exchanging knowing glances as their daughter continued her artistic exploration. "Tell me more about my great-great-grandmother," Aisha said, not looking up from her drawing. "What was her name?" Linda's heart skipped a beat, but she maintained her composure. "Her name was Sarah," she replied, the practiced story flowing smoothly. She had beautiful dark curls, just like yours. Robert leaned forward, adding warmth to the narrative. And she loved to draw too, just like you do. Aisha's face lit up at this detail. Really? What did she draw? She drew pictures of flowers and birds, Linda elaborated, weaving more details into their carefully constructed story. People came from all around to see her artwork. Ethan wandered into the room, settling beside his sister. He picked up a blue pencil and started drawing alongside her. Can I draw like great-great-grandma Sarah too? Of course you can, Robert answered, grateful for Ethan's innocent participation. Everyone in our family has special gifts. That's what makes us unique and wonderful. Mrs. Peterson, their neighbor, waved through the window as she walked past. She had noticed the twins' differences but never questioned it, offering only warm smiles and kind words when she saw the family together. You know, Linda continued, watching her children draw together, having different backgrounds in our family makes us special. It's like having more colors in a rainbow. Each one makes the whole picture more beautiful. Aisha nodded thoughtfully, adding another color to her drawing. Like my picture? I'm using lots of different colors. Exactly like that, Robert agreed, his voice steady despite the emotion building in his throat. Every color adds something special. The twins continued their artwork, sharing pencils and comparing their drawings. Linda and Robert maintained their gentle smiles, though beneath their calm exterior, they felt the weight of their fabricated story. Yet seeing their children's contentment and the natural bond between them reassured them that, for now, their explanation had provided the comfort and understanding Aisha needed. The school auditorium buzzed with excitement as parents and teachers gathered for the first-grade play. Aisha stood backstage in her costume, fidgeting nervously while Ethan gave her an encouraging thumbs up from the audience. Marcus sat comfortably between Linda and Robert, exchanging pleasant conversation with nearby parents about the upcoming performance. Aisha's been practicing her lines non-stop, Marcus mentioned to Mrs. Thompson, another parent. His warm smile and genuine pride reflected his deep connection to the young girl. As the first act concluded and intermission began, Linda noticed something different about Marcus. His usual energetic demeanor seemed subdued, and his face appeared paler than usual. When he stood to stretch his legs, she observed him steadying himself against the chair, taking slow, measured breaths. "Marcus, are you feeling all right?" Linda whispered, touching his arm gently. "Just a bit tired," he responded, attempting a reassuring smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. After the play ended and the children received their well-deserved applause, Linda pulled Marcus aside while Robert helped the twins gather their things. "Something's wrong, isn't it?" she asked directly, her voice filled with concern. Marcus hesitated, his shoulders slumping slightly. "I didn't want to worry anyone," he began, his voice low. "But I've been dealing with some health issues lately. The doctors are still running tests." Linda's eyes widened with concern. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" "You all have enough on your plates," Marcus replied, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't want to add to that." Later that evening, they gathered in the family's living room. The twins had gone to bed, leaving Linda, Robert, and Marcus to talk openly about his condition. "We want to help," Robert stated firmly, any lingering awkwardness about their unique situation forgotten in the face of Marcus's illness. Linda nodded in agreement. "Let us be there for your appointments, help with transportation, whatever you need." Marcus looked between them, his eyes glistening with emotion. "I don't know what to say," he managed, overwhelmed by their support. The three adults moved closer together on the couch, sharing a meaningful embrace that represented their commitment to facing this challenge as a family, regardless of their unconventional circumstances. The small gathering at Marcus's home felt intimate and warm as Linda arranged the dinner table with care. She had prepared his favorite dishes, and the aroma of home-cooked food filled the modest apartment. Marcus sat in his comfortable armchair, a blanket draped over his legs despite the mild evening temperature. "You didn't have to go through all this trouble," Marcus said, his voice softer than usual. Robert helped the twins set the table while Linda brought out the main course. "It's no trouble at all," she assured him with a gentle smile. Over the next few weeks, Marcus's condition deteriorated rapidly. What began as occasional doctor's visits soon turned into frequent hospital stays. The stark white walls of the hospital became an all-too-familiar sight, as Linda and Robert took turns accompanying him to his appointments. "I don't know how to thank you both," Marcus whispered during one particularly difficult day at the hospital. His face had grown gaunt, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. Linda and Robert exchanged glances, their earlier reservations about Marcus's role in their lives fading in the face of his suffering. That evening, they sat at their kitchen table after the twins had gone to bed, discussing their changing relationship with Marcus. "We need to do more," Linda said, her fingers wrapped around a cup of cooling tea. Robert nodded slowly. "You're right. Whatever our past concerns were, they don't matter now. He needs us." They created a detailed schedule, coordinating their work and family responsibilities to ensure Marcus always had someone by his side during treatments. Their neighbors noticed their dedication and began offering help. Mrs. Peterson volunteered to watch the twins during hospital visits, while Mr. Jenkins insisted on delivering home-cooked meals. The twins adapted to the new routine with remarkable resilience. Ethan helped pack snacks for hospital visits, while Aisha drew cheerful pictures to decorate Marcus's room. Their innocent gestures of support touched everyone deeply. During family game nights at the hospital, they would gather around Marcus's bed, playing board games and sharing stories. These moments, though tinged with the weight of illness, brought them closer together. Linda and Robert found themselves drawing strength from each other and from the unconditional love that had grown between all of them. As Marcus rested in his hospital bed one evening, surrounded by Aisha's artwork and the family's presence, Linda and Robert stood hand in hand, watching the twins share their school day stories with him. The scene before them reflected the unexpected beauty of their blended family, bound together by compassion and unwavering support. Several years later, Aisha sat at her desk in the advanced genetics classroom, her dark eyes focused intently on the teacher's presentation about DNA sequencing. Her notebook was filled with neat, detailed notes, and her hand shot up frequently to ask insightful questions that impressed even her teacher. At home, Linda and Robert noticed their daughter's growing passion for genetics. They watched as she pored over scientific journals and research papers, far beyond her grade level. Linda often found Aisha late at night, still awake and reading about ethical considerations in genetic research. "Mom," Aisha said one evening, "I want to write an article for the school newspaper about genetic ethics. Do you think they'll let me?" Linda smiled warmly. "Of course, sweetie. Your understanding of these topics is remarkable." With her parents' encouragement, Aisha began writing articles that caught the attention of the local newspaper. Her pieces discussed the importance of ethical research practices and celebrated family diversity. The newspaper editor was impressed by her mature perspective and offered her a regular column in the youth section. Ethan, sharing his sister's drive to make a difference, supported her endeavors while pursuing his own interest in social work. "You're going to change how people think about genetics," he told her proudly after reading one of her articles. Through Linda and Robert's connections, Aisha began meeting with local geneticists and ethics professors who were impressed by her enthusiasm and understanding. Dr. Thompson, a leading genetics researcher at the local university, became her mentor, guiding her through complex ethical discussions and encouraging her advocacy work. At community events, Aisha spoke with confidence about the importance of ethical considerations in genetic research. Her unique perspective as a child from a diverse family background added depth to her presentations, inspiring others to think differently about family structures and genetic research. The family gathered in their living room one evening for Aisha's presentation of her latest project. She stood before them, her poster board filled with detailed diagrams and ethical guidelines for genetic research. Linda and Robert watched with pride as their daughter articulated complex concepts with clarity and passion, while Ethan sat cross-legged on the floor, beaming at his sister's accomplishments. "The most important thing," Aisha explained, pointing to her carefully crafted presentation, "is that we consider the human impact of genetic research. It's not just about the science, it's about the families and lives we affect. The warm June sun filtered through the high school auditorium windows as Ethan and Aisha adjusted their graduation caps. The past 18 years had shaped them into remarkable young adults, each pursuing paths that reflected their unique experiences and passions. Linda smoothed Aisha's gown, her eyes glistening with pride. "Your speech is going to be wonderful, sweetheart." Robert stood nearby, helping Ethan with his honor cords. "You both have come so far," he said, his voice thick with emotion. As the ceremony began, the auditorium filled with family, friends, and community members who had witnessed their extraordinary journey. Marcus sat in the front row, somewhat frail but determined to be present for this milestone moment. When Aisha took the podium as valedictorian, her voice rang clear and confident. "Our differences make us stronger," she declared, gesturing to her brother. "Ethan and I are living proof that family bonds transcend genetics. Our journey has taught us that love, acceptance, and understanding are the foundations of true family." Ethan joined her at the podium, their hands clasped together. "Through our parents' unwavering love and dedication," he added, "we learned that forgiveness and compassion can overcome any challenge. Their example inspired my choice to pursue social work, to help other families find strength in their unique stories." The audience listened intently as the twins shared their story of unity despite their different backgrounds. Their words resonated with authenticity and hope, touching hearts and inspiring minds. At the celebratory dinner afterward, the family gathered around a large table filled with loved ones. Marcus, though visibly tired, beamed with pride. "Watching you both grow into such remarkable young adults has been one of my life's greatest joys," he said softly. Linda and Robert exchanged glances across the table, their hearts full of gratitude for the journey that had brought them to this moment. Their family's story had become a testament to the power of unconditional love and acceptance. The twins sat side by side, their graduation caps placed carefully on the table before them. Their achievements and bright futures stood as proof that extraordinary circumstances could lead to extraordinary love. If you enjoyed the story of Linda and her twins, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.